The thing about that, it's not a forced submission of my will for his. It's my, so I started thinking about, what about that word submission? An offer is always submitted, right? And then somebody has to accept the offer. But what are you submitting? Submission, sub means what? Under. Submarine. Where does a submarine reside, anybody? Under the water, right? And then it's subject to the water, and it works based on what it can do up under the water, right? Will a submarine function always on top of land? No. Well, it's not, right? It's made to be underwater. Submarine. Well, submission means that I'm submitting to the mission of God that he has for my life when I offer myself to him. But it has to be a voluntary submission. But it's interesting because we start talking about that voluntary submission. We clearly have an example of Jesus Christ in Matthew 26:39, where he says, remember, not my will be done, but yours. Now, do y'all really think Jesus wanted to be beat down like he was? Because remember, he was man. Although he still had his godly attributes, he was in man form. And do y'all really think in his flesh he really wanted that? I mean, how many of y'all like struggling, going through a bad situation? But the reality of it was, he understood what submission was all about. It's not about my will, it's about his will for my life. And if we really want to understand it, we've got to get to the point in our life where we say, whatever you want, even if what you want isn't what I want. Because most of the time, y'all, it's almost just the opposite of that. I mean, in Proverbs 3:5-6, it says what? Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him. And any of y'all ever had a friend or somebody y'all want to go to lunch with, and y'all went to lunch with a friend? Some of y'all never went to lunch with a friend. Y'all got no friend? Okay, I'm sorry. I'll be your friend. But imagine this scenario. And y'all might not have ever experienced this scenario, but I have. I'll say, you want to go to lunch today? I'll say, Pam, you want to go to lunch today? And Pam will say, yeah, I want to go to lunch. What would you like, Pam? Whatever you want, wherever you want to go, whatever you want, that's where I want to go. Okay, Pam, let's go get some Chinese. Well, I don't know about Chinese. That MSG just do something to me. Well, what about Mexican? Well, you know, that Mexican stuff just work on me in the evening time. Well, what about Italian? Ooh, they got too much pasta, too much. Well, what about like E&L barbecue? I don't know. You know that place. I don't know about it. Well, what about no, she don't want to go Chinese. What about where you want to go, Pam? Okay, what about Olive Garden? And then Pam said, oh yes, now if that's what you want to do. But I really want to do whatever you want to do. Now see, the reality is a lot of us, when it comes to God's will for our life, even though we want to test and approve it, we really want it to be, I want to do what God wants me to do when God wants me to do what I want to do. And we don't really want to admit that to ourselves. And so I really didn't want to use this illustration, but this just the illustration God put in my mind to use. Don't pay attention to the bird because he's trying to keep you from listening to this one. See, I grew up in church, and I knew what church said about certain things. Okay, I grew up knowing that church says sex outside of marriage is wrong. I knew that. But when I was 19, I met this like 30-something-year-old woman. And I was working at the movie theater, and she worked at Pier 1. And so, you know, typical young male, attractive 30-something-year-old female, I flirted all the time. You know, hey, you look good today. How you doing today? You know, I went by there every day. Then she come over and get her some popcorn and drink. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, and I was buff back then. You know, I might not look it now, but, you know, I did play football in college. You know, I could have, you know, but I can't do it now. But back then, I could live with you a little bit. But, you know, so I was buff, you know, so I was good looking. You know, I reckon they say she was a cougar for her time. And so When she first approached me about coming home with her one day after work, in my mind, I'm like, the conversation I'm having with myself, I can't go home with her. She might try and sex me. You see what I'm saying? I can't do that. That's wrong. But then, I had gone to college for a year, and I had become educated, and I had taken, Heritage, which is a course where they teach you about different religions and how everything comes together, and you find about the cultural differences of people. And so in my mind, I started to analyze this God thing and this word, this Bible, this revealed will of God, and I made the decision in my mind that it didn't really say it was sex outside of marriage for my generation. It was talking about the culture back then. Because, some things were only applicable to the people back then, like those blood sacrifices, animal sacrifices. It's only for back then, right? The Jews don't still do that. So clearly, when he said, now this was me as a 19-year-old wanting to get what he wanted, and so in my mind, I rationalized that God really did not mean that for me. Now, it was fine for those folk back then, but when his word said, no sex outside of marriage, to me, it was just like when one day I really wanted some Krispy Kremes when I was on a diet. And if God wanted me to have those Krispy Kremes that day, I said that when I drove by Krispy Kreme, there would be an open spot or no line when I went by there. So on my way to Walmart, there was a line, and there were no open spots. But I knew it was God's will for my life. And so when I came back around, there was no open spot, and there was a line. Then I remember something else I needed at Walmart, and I went back around, and there was still no line. There was still a line, and still no spot. But y'all, guess what happened? I knew I was right about God's will, because when I came back that second time, there was a park right there in front of the door. God wanted me to have Krispy Kreme. Y'all laughing, but isn't that what we do sometimes? When I want what I want and not what God wants from me. Lord, show me this sign. If you want me to buy this car, let them drop the price another $1,000. Now, when you went in, they're going to drop it at least $1,500. And then you don't even care that when they finance it for you, it's going to be at 28 or 21 or 22%, and you're not going to be able to afford it because we get so caught up in what he's teaching us to test something to see if it's God's will. And listen, if every time you want to do something, God's will agrees with your will, guess what? It probably ain't God's will. If every time it agree with you. And we don't want to admit that, but anyway, let me move on.